We are ready to jump into Galatians 2:20 today. Remember our first lesson, we talked about who is man? How did God create us to be? Who did God create man to be? So we discussed that, and that was a precursor to Galatians 2:20 and understanding the nature of man, that you are a vessel filled with God, created to be filled with the substance of God. Number 2, that you're the house of God. Number 3, that you're the temple of God, that God dwells in you. God lives in you. You are the house of God. And number 4, that you're the garden of God. That was a preamble to understanding what we're going to begin to talk about today in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. So why don't we jump right into Galatians chapter 2:20 and start. Today I want to talk about the old man. So Galatians chapter 2 verse 20 says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So Paul starts by saying that I am crucified with Christ. And this is where we're starting today, with this small I am. Who is this I am that Paul is talking about? We saw last week that there are 6 different references to I in just this one verse. And if you add me, there are 8 different references to himself, to the first person. And we have to interrogate this. Why is Paul referring to himself all these times? And then you realize that almost each I represents a different person he's talking about. So what is this about? I am crucified with Christ. We said number 1, that's difficult to understand if we look at it literally, because first of all, Paul was not on the cross with Christ. So how can he say that he was crucified with Christ? We did not see him with Christ on the cross. He was not even a believer. He was not even a disciple of Jesus. So how was he crucified with Christ? Number 2, and then not only is he talking about himself, but he's also talking about me and you. Every believer was crucified with Christ on the cross. We can see that from other verses, especially in Romans, as we shall see, and Colossians chapter 3. So if every believer is crucified with Christ on the cross, and yet on the cross we see Christ only, who are these people that were crucified with him? Because you are not even born yet. How are you crucified with Christ when you are not born? How is that possible? To understand that. Number 2, if he says that I am crucified with Christ, to crucify means to kill on a cross. So to be put to death on the cross, on the punishment of the cross. So if you are crucified with Christ, then that means, if it be true, then it means that you are dead. How are you then alive, Paul? How are you speaking? How are you talking? If you are crucified with Christ, you should be dead. You should be buried in a grave somewhere. You can't be the same person that is talking now, and yet you're claiming that you are crucified. So those are questions that we begin to think about, and then they lead us to study this a little bit further. When Paul says that he was crucified with Christ, who is he referring to? Of course, we know from 1 Thessalonians 5:23 that we are spirit, soul, body, that you are not just the body. You are not just what we look at and what we touch and what we shake hands with and what we hug. No, that's just the body part of you. But then there's the soul part of you, the one that talks, the one that feels, the one that thinks. And then that's not all, but there's the spirit part of you, who is the real you. This is where the life comes from. This is where the sustenance, the activation comes from the spirit man on the inside of you, and that is who you are. The primal you, the real you, is the spirit part, the spirit you. So if we understand that, then we begin to have an understanding of what Paul is going to talk about here when he says that he is crucified with Christ. So how is he crucified with Christ? Nevertheless, he says, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. So how do you live and yet you are crucified with Christ? I think that's a valid question to ask, really. I am crucified with Christ. Which part of you is crucified? Who of you, that's wrong English, who of you is crucified with Christ? If you say that you are crucified with Christ. We can see you. We can talk to you. What do you mean that you are crucified with Christ? And then we can find a better answer by then looking at other verses that are going to talk about the man or the one that was crucified with Christ. So in a nutshell, it's the old man. Remember when we saw that we are three parts: body, soul, and spirit. And then we saw in our previous class that the way that God created us, He created us, our bodies, to be a house, a dwelling place where God lives, where the Spirit lives. So let's go back to that understanding because it will help us very much here. Let's put it this way, that when God created you, God made the body first. You remember that He molded the body. And then God breathed the breath of life. That is, He imparted the Spirit into that body, and that body became alive, because the Spirit is what vivifies the body. The Spirit is what gives the body life, right? So your body and your soul had a spirit, a source of life in it at the beginning when you were born. There was an inner you that we could not see, that we could not touch. The inner you is what the Bible calls the old man. And this language is very important. The Bible calls that inner you that was there at the beginning, before you believed in Jesus, the one that was in you, that was the real you, that was your true nature, that was the Spirit living inside your body. The Bible calls that nature, that spirit, the old man. The old man. Sometimes it's also known as the sin nature. Sometimes it's also known as the carnal mind, or in this teaching I'll use the term the natural man. The natural man. And this is the you that existed before you were born again. This is the you that was birthed by your parents. This is the you that was brought forth before you got born again. The natural man, the carnal man, the old you. The Bible calls him the old man. Now that's very, very, very important, because as we are going to say today, I'm going to discuss some of the attributes or the nature of the old man. But before I even start, I want to say that the old man is the part of you that was crucified on the cross with Christ. Your old nature, your old spirit, the person that you were, the true you, the real you that you were before you believed in Jesus, before you were born again. The old nature, the old creation, the old person, the old man, the sin nature, the carnal man, the Adamic man that you were, is the one that was crucified with Christ on the cross. And I have a Bible verse to share with you here. In Romans chapter 6 and verse 6, it says this: knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him. Our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. So do you see that? This is saying that the old man, the person that you were before you believed, the person that you were before you got born again, was crucified with Christ, was put to death with Christ on the cross. The old you was eliminated. He was literally dragged to the cross and executed together with Christ. On the cross, he was put to death. The old man, the old you, the sin nature, the carnal man. So Romans chapter 6 verse 6 has made it plain which part of you Paul is talking about. When Paul says, I was crucified with Christ, or I am crucified with Christ, he comes to the Romans and explains what he's talking about Which part of me was crucified with Christ? Obviously, my body was not crucified with Christ, because my body did not exist and Christ was alone on the cross physically. Obviously, my soul was not crucified with Christ, because my soul did not exist. But my old man, the sin nature, the person that I was before as a believer, the child of Satan, as I'll show you, that one was crucified with Christ. That one died with Christ. That one was put to death with Christ. He's the one that was eliminated by the cross of Jesus Christ. Glory be to God. He was taken out of the way. And I have news for you. That is very, very good news for you. The elimination, the execution of the old man is very good news for you, because that is what salvation is. That is what it means to be born again. So why don't we look at some Bible verses where we're at it, because there's lots of verses here that are going to talk about. Why don't we start by defining or describing this old man? In other words, let's talk about who we were, the person who we were that was crucified on the cross with Christ. Let's talk about him. What kind of person were we, and why was it necessary to be crucified and to die on the cross with Christ? So John chapter 3 verse 6 says that, number one, this is the first thing I want the first point I want to make is that the old man was flesh. He was born of flesh and he was flesh. That's why he needed to be killed. And we'll define what flesh is much later. So let's read John chapter 3 verse 6. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. So he says that which is born of the flesh is flesh. You would think that is just talking about the body, but then as we study, we realize that the flesh is not always just talking about the body, because the flesh is not just the physical body. Yeah, the flesh is many times he's using the flesh to refer to like an operating system, like the law which is working in the carnal man, the law which is working in the flesh man. I've used the word flesh. The law which is working in the one who is not born again. That law is flesh. It's like an operating system that works in one who is not born again. When you get born again, a new system comes in, a new system of instruction, of commands comes in. But before you're born again, you have a system working in you called flesh, right? So, but I'll explain that later. So, the first thing that we are understanding right here is that this old man is a flesh man. He was born of the flesh and he was flesh, and his nature was flesh. And because his flesh is contrary to truth, because flesh by nature is contrary to truth. In other words, flesh is the enemy of God. Flesh is the enemy of truth. Flesh is the enemy of the Spirit of God. This old man, the person that you were before you believed, was the enemy of God because he was flesh. He was the enemy of truth because he was flesh. He was the enemy of the Spirit of God because he was flesh. He could not be transformed. He had to be executed, killed, gotten rid of. And that's what Jesus did on the cross. He dragged the flesh man with him on the cross and put him to death once and for all time, to deliver you and me. So, and because his flesh, here's point number 2, he profits nothing. So we get that from John chapter 6 and verse 63. It says, it is the spirit that quickens, the flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. It is the spirit that quickens. That word quicken means to make alive, to give life, to vivify, to zoify. It is the spirit that quickens, that makes alive, that heals, that zoifies, that vivifies. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. This old man profited you nothing, because he profits nothing, because he is flesh. The old man cannot heal, he cannot deliver, he cannot save, he cannot help, he cannot bless, because he's flesh. When you're operating in the flesh, you cannot receive the full salvation of God, because the flesh profits nothing. The old man profits nothing. He is contrary to the truth. He is contrary to the life of God. Whenever we stay in the old, which was crucified, remember, the old man was put to death. Let me say it another way. The part of you that was unprofitable to God was put to death. The part of you that was unprofitable even to you was put to death. He was summarily executed on the cross of Jesus Christ. He was taken and killed and removed from you, the one that profited you nothing, the one that profited God nothing. You cannot say that you don't profit God anything. If you're a believer, you're very valuable, very profitable to God. He has made you a vessel that he has poured his preciousness into. He has made you a house that he lives in, a temple that he is glorified in, a garden in which he has planted his seed to grow. You are the body of Christ, you see. So the members of the body of Christ. So you cannot say that you profit God nothing. It's true that you profited God nothing in the past previously, but since you believed, you are valuable, you are useful, you are profitable to God. Amen. So this old man, point number 3, he lives out of a vain mind. He's vain-minded. So we get that from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 to 19. This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. So number 1, he says that do not walk as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind. So this is important. He says that the old man operates in the vanity of his mind. The Gentiles, the ones that have not believed yet, they operate in a vain mind, in the vanity of their mind. And this word for vain, for vain mind, it is referring to an unprofitable mind. It's referring to a perverse mind. It is referring to a mind that is devoid of truth, a mind that is devoid of life, a mind that is empty of the life of God, empty of the goodness of God, empty of the morality of God, a mind that is filled with darkness, that is filled with death, that is filled with sin and evil. So he says that the old man operates in this vanity of the mind. The Gentile person operates in a vain mind. They operate in a mind that is perverse of truth. A mind that, let's put it another way, they operate in a mind that cannot think the thoughts of God. That's important. They operate in a mind that cannot think the thoughts of God, that cannot think at God's wavelength. Yeah, they operate in a mind that is dead, a mind that is dark. Imagine a dark mind, you see. So a mind that cannot see. So in fact, you look at this next one. It says, having their understanding darkened. So the understanding, the nous, the part of us that the understanding is like the eyes of the spirit. Yeah, with your understanding, your spirit sees. The understanding illuminates the inner man. So when he says that their understanding is darkened, it means that their inner man is operating in darkness. They are spiritually blind. They cannot see God. They cannot see truth. They cannot perceive the will of God because they are in darkness. This is who we were. This is who you were before you believed. This is what the old man was. He was darkness. He operated in a dead, vain, darkened mind. A mind devoid of light, devoid of life, devoid of truth, an evil mind. He says, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. So you see that we were cut off from the life of God. To alienate, to separate, to cut off. We were prevented from the life of God because of a vain mind that we had that could not perceive and understand God. And by the way, mind does not mean just thoughts. And mind does not mean brain. Those are different things altogether. This word here for mind is talking about more than just your capacity to think. It's more. It's your capacity to think, your capacity to perceive, your capacity to feel, your capacity to understand, your capacity to comprehend, your wisdom. It's all of these things combined. The mind, I don't know how to express that properly right now, but the mind is bigger than just your thinking. The mind is bigger than, in fact, the Bible writers, when they use the term mind, they are rarely just referring to thinking, because sometimes they're talking about meditating, sometimes they're talking about pondering, and it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. In fact, let me just drop this in there. Maybe in time we'll have to cover it later. But the mind is in the spirit, it's in the soul, it's in the body. The mind is from head to toe. You see, every part of you the mind is engaged in every part of you, and even scientists are now discovering that this is true, that we not everything goes through our brains. Yeah, we have every part of our body has this ability to process information, because the mind is from head to toe. But that's a discussion for another day. But where were we? I was saying here in that this alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. It says, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past failing, have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. Being past failing, they are past failing. They cannot feel God. They cannot comprehend God. They don't have this ability because they have been darkened and they have been hardened. This is who you were. This is who the old man was. The old man was your enemy. You were your enemy in the past. And so when Jesus came, he killed him. He eliminated him. Jesus just took him to the cross and put him to death. They put him to death on the cross, the old man, and saved you and changed you by nature. God did not just deal with the symptoms of sin and disobedience and rebellion and sickness and disease and poverty and failure. Jesus did not just deal with those symptoms. He dealt with the root cause, which was the old man. The old man was your enemy. All your problems came from the old man. And Jesus put him to death. Jesus grabbed him unwillingly by force and took him to the cross, and both of them were executed, and he set you free by dying. You know, we've always had this picture that Jesus saved us from death by dying on our behalf. That's true, but there's a greater reality. Jesus did not just go and die for you on your behalf and left you to survive. You've had this story of the illustration of your legs are broken and you've fallen before a huge truck speeding towards you, and you can't get out of the way, and the truck is just coming, and the driver is drunk, he can't see you, it's late in the night, and is going to crash you. And then out of nowhere, Jesus appears and he rushes and throws you out of the way. But because the truck is coming too fast, he does not have time to get out of the way, and so the truck crashes him instead of you. And when we were younger, they used to teach us something like that, which is the idea that Jesus died the death you should have died. Jesus saved you. Jesus got you out of death and he died for you. That was true, but it wasn't fully true. It wasn't fully accurate, because Jesus did not just die for you. Jesus took you with him in his death. You understand that? You did not survive the death of Jesus. So it's not like Jesus took you out of the way and died on your behalf. No. Jesus came, he grabbed you, and he took you together with him in his death. You both died. That's what Paul says, I am crucified, or I was crucified with Christ. We both were killed. So here's a better illustration. You are in the middle of the road, your legs are broken, you can't get out of the way. This truck is coming towards you. The driver is drunk, it's late in the night, you can't see, he's going to crash you. Jesus appears out of nowhere and he rushes towards you. And instead of him throwing you out of the way and getting crushed, Jesus grabs you and holds on tight to you so that the truck can crash both of you. And that's what happened at the cross. Jesus held on too tight. And then this truck came and crushed both of us. Jesus and you, we both died. And that's what the cross is. It's him taking you with him into his death. You were crucified with Christ, the old man. Jesus did not save the old man. Jesus took the old man to die together with him. Now, if you don't know that that's good news, I want to assure you that that's good news. Glory to God. That's very good news.